Okay, so this is going to be a tutorial on how to set up SFML for Codeblocks on Windows. And you're going to need three programs, or three downloads essentially, which is going to be listed in this video's description. You're going to need Codeblocks. I think you could use any version, but you could probably just use the newest version, 20.03. And you're gonna want the mingw32bit setup.exe. See here, I'm highlighting the other versions. You want the mingw32bit setup. And this website's pretty funny. As you see, I'm gonna click SourceForge, and I'm gonna assume that the download is going to be the one I want. But as you can see, the freeze frame here, I'm actually downloading the 64-bit version of Codeblocks 20.03 MinGW setup, and that's the wrong version, and that's going to lead to a lot of problems, which I will point out later. But anyways, this is the wrong version, and I mean the difference between 32-bit and 64-bit is like how much data your program or software is going to use, and I don't think I'll be needing, or you probably won't be needing 64-bit version, so just get the 32-bit version. So I'm going to download and install this wrong version, and it's going to lead to a lot of problems. Make sure you get the right version, or else things aren't going to work. It can still work with the 64-bit version, but you have to do some things differently. But either way, it should work with both. But there's just some differences you have to do when you use 64 versus 32-bit. So we're going to download the SFML source. I'm going to get 2.50 because my other projects are work with 2.50. So I'm going to download the 2.50 version. Now technically you could download any version. You can download the newest version as well, because we're going to be building it with Cmake, and Cmake will build your library for you for whatever compiler you're using. So you technically can use any version of SFML, but I'm just going to use 2.50 because that's the one I work with. So these are probably the instructions you're following for like the tutorials for how to set it up. And these tutorials, like, I'm not the best reader, and like I don't always follow directions the best when I have to read them. So a video would be nice, and I've looked at some other tutorials, and they're pretty good. But sometimes you come to an error that they don't talk about, and it's really frustrating that, you know, like if you go on the forums too, a lot of the help is, oh, did you read correctly? Did you do this correctly? It's like, yeah, I think I did. You usually think you do, but you miss like one or two steps. But you know, because it's not like pointed out directly, it's like really hard to figure out where you went wrong. So hopefully with this tutorial I can help you with that. I'm going to point out some mistakes that you might do when trying to set up SFML dynamically or statically, and hopefully this will be very helpful. So I'm just downloading all the things that you need, and you're gonna get this. You want to make a new folder. You can put it in any folder wherever you want it to put it. You're gonna take the source folder, and you're gonna extract it there, and that's gonna be your source location. So when you start working with Cmake, this is where this is the path you want to put in. We'll get there when the video gets there. Yeah, so these are the instructions. If you do follow these instructions, it should work, but sometimes, like I said previously, it's hard to follow. So here we're just going to set the Cmake to find its source. You're going to set the source path here for SFML. So this is going to be your source path. And then for the build path, I put it in a separate folder. You can put it in the same folder. Either way works. Having it separately is just nice, so you don't get confused with all the folders within each other. So here I make a new folder for where it's going to build. I have an older version of Cmake, so I'm going to get some errors here, but I'm going to reinstall Cmake with the newer version, and those errors will clear up. So make sure Like, I didn't download CMake, the newer version here, but I will download it because I end up getting some errors, and it tells me to reinstall it. So I just reinstall CMake later here. So here's me installing the wrong version, and it's gonna skip over. It's gonna install. You're gonna see that you're not gonna see it because I'm gonna edit it out. But there's going to be a lot of issues because I'm going to be trying to link 32-bit libraries onto the 64-bit version of CMake, and I didn't know what was going on because I assumed I had the 32-bit version already, and then, it's just all bad. So I spent like 45 minutes trying to figure out what was going on because, the assumption I was doing it right. Like, I assumed that the download was the correct version because on my other computer I have 17.03 or version of Codeblocks, and I don't know, the download page for that one is different, I guess. So I had the right version, the 32-bit one. So when I installed it on my other computer, it worked perfectly fine, like initially. But I guess the 20.03, the SourceForge download link is weird, and it just sends you to the not correct. I don't know why they put a bunch of links for it if they're just going to lead to the same place. CMake's going to get an error here, and it's because it can't find the path for how to compile the library. So if it can't find that, you're going to get this error, and it's going to say C and C++ compiler identification not found. So you're not going to want to set the path correctly, which I will show later. Here's the so I'm trying to build with the 64-bit version, and it can't find any of the files, and then that leads me to a whole rabbit hole. I go searching on the forums like, oh, what's going on? Why isn't the way I did it correctly not working here? Because I am assuming that I have the 32-bit version of Codeblocks when I don't, and that's going to lead to problems. So here I'm going to realize that I don't have the 32-bit version, and I'm going to be like, oh bruh, I just spent 45 minutes looking for a problem somewhere else when the problem is here, right? So, hopefully you won't have to do anything like this. So I'm showing you that you need the right version of Codeblocks, and the right, if you're trying to do 32-bit, you need the 32-bit version. If you're trying to do 64-bit, you need the 64-bit version, right? So if you try to do half, it's not going to work. Nothing's going to work. So, and you're going to be wondering why, because you're gonna be like, dang, I'm following the directions, but nothing's working, and you have a mismatch between what 64-bit version you're trying to do, like what libraries you're trying to use, and like the actual compiler that you have. It's gonna be different. You're gonna have issues. So here I am. I'm downloading the right version of Codeblocks, which I will link in the description, so you don't have to go through these. Guaranteed to work if you download the things I give you and follow exactly what I'm doing. Hopefully it's guaranteed to work. So here I am downloading the right version, and hopefully it will skip over. I'm going to install this version. I'm going to have the right version. I'm going to link the right libraries, and hopefully it will work. Well, it will work, but for you guys, hopefully it'll work. So the thing you need to do before you start anything, in order to use CMake, you need to set the path to your GCC so it knows what to compile, like how to compile the SFML library. So you're going to go to your control panel, systems, advanced system settings. You're going to go to environment variable. You're going to edit the path, and you're going to insert the directory of your MinGW folder, which is here in your program. The default install location should work, but you get the path here. You're going to add a new path. You're going to put that in, and now CMake will know how to compile your SFML source. So here's CMake. I had something previously loaded, so I'm gonna delete the cache here, but if you just installed CMake, it will be brand new. You're gonna configure, and it's gonna load something up. Here there's like a warning that I've never seen before, because this is my first time using 20.03, and the newest version of Cmake, you're going to get a warning here. I'm not sure if that warning is important or if it might affect something down the line, but I'm just going to ignore that warning for now. You're going to configure it. You're going to generate a Codeblocks file, which will be found in your directory, wherever you set your Cmake directory to. And you're going to open that up in Codeblocks. There's an environment error. The environment error, because I had previously had some Codeblocks settings, like my toolchain executables are wrong, so I'm just going to set them correctly here. If your toolchain executables are wrong, you're going to get an environment error. That's not the only reason for an environment error, but the reason here is because I have the wrong program files set. So I'm going to set those correctly. I won't get that error. I'm going to build the generated file from Cmake. So it's going to build this file. I'm going to skip. It's going to skip until when it's completed. And here I'm just showing you the linker settings and the compiler include for dynamic, but we'll get to that later. So I'm going to build the files. I'm going to build the debug version as well. So the first, you're going to have to build it 4 times. You're going to build the release version of the dynamic libraries. You're going to build the debug version of the dynamic libraries. So here I'm building the debug version of the dynamic libraries. So it's going to run. Hopefully I skip to the finish, skips to the end. I'm going to do this another 2 more times for the static libraries. So here I'm going to uncheck build shared libraries, so that's static. And I'm going to build I see if you click it twice, my mouse has a weird issue where if you click it twice, or if you click once, it clicks twice, so that don't click, just click it once. So I'm going to build the static version of the debug here. That's going to build, just going to skip. Then I'm also going to build the release versions of the static release libraries. I'm going to generate that. I'm going to open Codeblocks. I'm going to rebuild the project again. And so this, you'll have your 4 libraries built. Once it's done, you can close that. And now you can try to test if it works. So you're done with Cmake now. You don't have to worry anything about Cmake. You're going to make a new project, empty project with nothing in it. I'm going to call it test. You can put it wherever you want. I'm just going to put it in the same folder as my other SFML folders. And you're going to build that. Or not going to build it. You're going to make the project. And then with the default settings, you don't need to change anything. You're going to add a new file, main.cpp, you know. You can test if the SFML code works. You're going to go to the tutorial page. You're going to copy and paste the tutorial code that they give you just to open up a window. You're going to see if it runs after you set up your project. I'm setting up global compiler settings, but if you right click your project and click build options, you can set up the same thing over there. But setting it up globally just means that you don't have to worry about it anytime you make a new project. So here I'm just adding a couple lines of code. I'm going to include the SFML audio.hpp and create a sound buffer. So that will test if the audio files are working. So Cmake has built SFML. You're going to go to the library of that folder that you want to build SFML in, and you're going to copy the DLLs into your project folder. Now, the OpenAL32 is actually in the source SFML folder, and it's in external libraries bin, and you want the 32-bit version, which is the x86. I get an error here because I actually haven't rebuilt my project, so it's using previous compiler settings. Here's the link library order for the debug dynamic version of SFML. This is going to be your compiler source, and then the linker libraries will be these ones. Wherever your build and source folder are, you're going to have the include library, external library, MinGW 32-bit. So here I'm explaining that if you don't have the right version of if you don't have OpenAL, it won't work. It'll say it'll be missing OpenAL32, right? But also, if you don't have the right version, you'll also get another error. So I'm going to put in the 64-bit version, and you're going to see that it's not going to tell you, oh, you have the 64-bit version of the audio 32. It's going to give you a 0xC0007B error, and it just won't open. And that could mean a lot of things. But in this case, it means that you have the wrong version of OpenAL32. So you have to make sure that you have to include the 32-bit version, which is times 86. So if you post that, if you have that in your folder, it'll work. So that's one of the errors you can run into, is not having the OpenAL32 file DLL in your project folder, or not having the right version of the OpenAL32. So now that's the dynamic setup. It's pretty straightforward. You don't have to do, there's no complicated things you should. Dynamic is usually the one people set up because it's pretty easy. There's the error there, it's harder to mess up. So for the static libraries, you have to add the S-D, and it's the same order, but you also have to include the external libraries here. So I'm typing in the external library order here. So when you're gonna have this order as well, you can just copy the exact order I'm using here, and it should work. And make sure you type it in with the correct names. Anytime you have like undefined reference errors, there's something wrong with the linker errors, or you're linking the wrong libraries. So those are the one of the two. And the linker order one's the easy one to see that you've done wrong, but the one where you're linking the wrong libraries is messed up. It seems straightforward, like, oh yeah, you just linked the wrong libraries, but like if you're not thinking that you did, and it's just all bad. You have no idea what's going on. So if I build this, so anytime you change the compiler settings, you should rebuild your project. Here I build it, it works, but I actually haven't rebuilt the project, so it's not using the new settings I put in. I'm getting undefined reference here. So that's because I haven't established the compiler to use the static libraries. So if you go to compiler settings, defines, one of the first things it's you have to set it so that it uses the static libraries. You have to put in that SFML underscore static. So here it should run. It does run. So this is statically set up. So you can see everything's running. So all the settings here are correct. But I'm going to go through the errors that you can go through here. So if you don't include the right folder, you'll have like cannot find SFML header file. So that's in the compiler. In the linker settings, if you link the wrong external library, as you see I did here, I linked the 64-bit version, I'm going to have all these undefined reference orders. No matter how much you change the link order, you'll get these errors. That's just going to happen. And you might be lost at like, oh, the link order is correct. I think I'm linking the right libraries, but it's going to be wrong. So here I don't even include the external libraries. And that's when you'll get this error. It says it cannot find the external libraries. That means you either put the wrong directory in your linker, or you don't have it. So here I'm going to put, I'm going faster, right? And I'm going to literally put the library in the wrong place. I'm going to put it in the compiler, and I'm going to try to run it again, and I'm going to get the same error because I haven't established that this is where the external libraries are, because it's in the wrong tab. So I'm like, wait a minute, it was just working, why isn't it working now? See, it's small things like this that can lead to errors. Like you think you're doing it right and you're just not doing it right. So make sure you put things in the right place. So here I go back, I'm like, oh, I put it in the compiler section when it should be in the linker section. So I'm going to remove that, put it back in the right place, and it's going to work again. So you see here, this is located in your source folder. You have to include the external libraries. I think, I'm not sure it even mentions that, but that's something you have to do. That's why I see a lot of the forums are like, I have this cannot find this file error. Well, that's where it is. You need to put it in the linker tab and say that this is where the external libraries are. And yeah, it should work here. Here I go through the other errors that you can go through. So this is if the link order is wrong. As you see, I'm going to try to change up the order and it still work, which is, I think it wouldn't work if you had more stuff in your CPP or like your project files, but it still works here. I'm confused. I'm like, oh, why does it work? The link order is wrong. But I'm sure it won't work once you start using the library more and it actually runs into issues. So here I try to move flag somewhere else and it'll still work. But it only stops working once you start using the libraries and then something wrong, like something goes wrong. So you want to make sure the order is right. So here I make the obvious link order, like obvious incorrect link order, where I move system above the other files. So I'm gonna put audio under system, which is completely wrong, and because I have the sound buffers, I'm gonna build it, and it's gonna give me undefined reference errors. So if your dependencies are wrong, you'll also get undefined reference errors, and that will lead to issues. So here I'm reordering it back. You want the order to be correct. You can use this exact order that I have on screen here. Rebuild will work. And these are like the main errors you'll come to. You're having the wrong OpenAL32 file, or not including the OpenAL32 in your project folder. You're linking the wrong library or the wrong location or the wrong library to your compiler. You have the wrong link order, or you don't have SFML underscore static in your defines for your compiler, so it doesn't know to statically set it up statically. And I think that's a majority of the errors that you're going to run into. Sorry, this tutorial is like kind of all over the place. I ran into a bunch of errors earlier with the other previous things, so I had like a bunch of things set up, but I try to order it as well as I can. As you can see, my Cmake generated files are in a separate folder. You could leave it in the same folder, but I just put it in a separate folder because having things separate makes it easier to organize. You want to use the right 64 or 32-bit version of the libraries. So there, I was using the 64-bit one earlier and I was running into a bunch of errors, but had I just used the 64-bit version of the libraries, I could have set up a 64-bit version of Codeblocks and SFML. But I don't plan on working with anything that big or making anything that requires 64-bit, so I'm just going to use 32-bit. And following these instructions, if you did follow them, it should work, but sometimes there are errors that are just better pointed out if you could see the process of going through it. And that'll be it. Hopefully this helped you, and thanks for watching. I plan to make some future videos on maybe a game engine or something like that if I ever get to it. So yeah, that's it.